Hello, everyone. This is Data-Driven Formula One with Patrick, Henz, and Ganna Pogrebna. Hi, Patrick.
Hello, Ganna. Hello, everybody.
All right,
Back in the
so very
80s.
exciting season,
Yep,
1983.
that's right.
Mhm.
Season in a nutshell. First, the updates. Uh, Before the season already, we had the last race of the champions as a non-official race inside the agenda, won by Kike Rosberg. And the other change, as a consequence of the 1982 seasons, ground effect cars had been understood as too dangerous, as especially, for example, if you are leaving the track, you lose quite abruptly the contact of the car with the ground, and then it's practically uncontrollable, which can lead to serious accidents. That's why it was decided that after the 82 season, these cars had been banned.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I guess maybe we need to explain to people who don't know what ground effect is, what it is. And yeah, so basically it's like a aerodynamic feature of the car that kind of gives you this additional downforce.
Yeah,
And yeah, so exactly as Patrick said, like when you're kind of cutting really well, the majority of tracks are very curvy, especially in Europe. And yeah, so when you're doing that, that's quite a big danger when you are driving a ground effect car.
exactly. I mean, now have an advantage if you're an engineer. I mean, to say it very basically, it's an opposite effect to an airplane. Instead, that when faster you go, that you go in the air, then you get somehow stronger connected to the ground.
To
So it's
ground.
like would be something like a reverse wing, very
Yes,
basically spoken.
yeah, exactly. And the main kind of the way how you normally achieve the ground effect is has to do with the way the wings are designed
Mhm.
on the car normally. So the ground effect cars have like a very particular look, and yeah, so in 1983 we lost an opportunity to see them because yeah, they're just too dangerous and
Exactly.
causing quite a few accidents, as we saw, in fact, in 1982.
Exactly. A pioneer had been Lotus. Colin Chapman understood, took airplane engineering and used this technology for his cars. There had been some very famous ground effect cars. Of course, first Lotus dominated the season. Maybe the most famous one is the Brabham fan car, which won the Swedish Grand Prix. But later, after this, Brabham, it is because it was not only a ground effect car, but also had this big fan, which you
Fan.
can see, which even fostered the effect, something which Brabham took went away with because there was a high risk that other teams would go against this on a legal way or just would copy it. So, and as Bernie Ecclestone was not only head of Brabham but also head of the FOCA, had a little bit the two heads, he decided to not damage his political career. Uh, to go away with this technology.
Yeah, that's right. Okay,
Okay, then.
so wow, it's a very remarkable season, primarily because
Mhm.
there was one person who led the championship prior to the final race, and then it was a completely different person
Yeah.
who won the season. You probably can make out which driver won the season just looking at the standing, but maybe not. So you
Yeah.
will see. But judging from what you see on the screen, you probably can guess which constructor won the season. So I think that's pretty obvious. but we will kind of go step by step, and we will start in Brazil and
Yep.
go all the way to South African Grand Prix.
That's right. So we are again Jacarepaguá, Brazil, Sao Paulo. And you see here the Brabham with the typical Parmalat livery, victory by local Nelson Piquet. Then Niki Lauda for McLaren and Jacques Laffite.
Mm-hmm. And so we had because there was a ban on the as we already established on ground effect cars. So we also saw a disqualification, right?
Yeah.
Because Elio De Angelis, he wanted to race on the Lotus Cosworth, and he couldn't do that essentially because he just got disqualified. It was against the rules.
Exactly. And interesting, over the last years, we saw the development of the turbo engine, and in '83, they would be now completely dominating. And here we see Nelson Piquet in the Brabham, and Brabham would switch to the BMW turbo engine, but for Brazil, they still used the conventional Cosworth because the turbos are much faster, but the problem is reliability, and that's why he still used the Brabham with the Cosworth motor. As Ganna mentioned, Eli De Angelis wanted to do the same, but became disqualified. Also disqualified Keke Rosberg because he was pushed to start inside the pits. And this now historically relevant because this was the last victory for Cosworth engine for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And a long time, I mean 1993.
That's right.
But to be honest, this 90s Cosworth was very different than the ones 10 years ago in Brazil. So we stay in the Americas, California, Long Beach. Victory for John Watson, as you can see here on the photo, if you are connected via YouTube or via Spotify video. Then his colleague, Niki Lauda. So a good start for Niki Lauda in the first races. And then we have René Arnoux. It was the first pole position for Patrick Tambay. It was the last race in Long Beach. And also Alan Jones, the former champion, returned for one race to replace Chico Serra at Arrows. So Alan Jones retired after the 81 season. But he was thinking of a comeback. For example, he was asked for one race by Ferrari in '82 in Monza, but declined. And we saw then Mario Andretti, sorry, for the two races at the end of the '82 season. But now Alan Jones got the opportunity to replace the Brazilian Chico Serra at the Arrows team.
Yeah, I just want to say, and I probably will say this at the end when we discuss kind of the legacy of the season. One of the very cool feature of the season is that we had a lot of French driving talent on on the circuit. So let's just see. So we have Alain Prost, who is the obvious, the obvious here.
Yeah.
René Arnoux, obviously. Patrick Tambay, that Patrick just mentioned, and the person who came third in Brazil, so Jacques Laffite. So again, we have four, very cool French drivers, and for quite a while it was sort of I think drivers who were from kind of English-speaking countries, and Italians, people who represented Italy, but this was really a year when French driving finally produced quite a few people who were very competitive. So
Yeah, and yes, it was practically in the 1980s up to 1990s. Of course, this was not just luck, but somehow systematically, because young French drivers had good opportunities to start in the lower classes, had been supported, and there was enough attention by French people, because we had two teams. We had the famous Renaults, which you see here in the first row, for example, and we had the traditional blue Ligier. So we had a lot of positive attention in France towards Formula One. So you could finance a good systematic approach to support local drivers. For example, the total opposite to what we had in Germany in the 80s and early 90s. We had German drivers who had been struggling, maybe not only because of lacking talent, but also clearly to lacking support by German industry, for example.
well, it's a kind of complex problem, right? So it's a training
Yeah.
opportunities. It's a very expensive sport to be
Exactly.
to be in, because you need to invest quite a lot of money. Not all parents can afford, taking their kids to these types of events. And so as the drivers kind of became younger and younger, the infrastructure started to develop around them. So it was not just a family anymore. So you actually could find places to train. And so that was also a sign that this infrastructure started to grow.
Exactly. And really, in France, there have been very good infrastructure to support these talents. And then, so these results are not only luck, but it was quite systematically in France.
Yeah.
And
And
speaking about France, Paul Ricard. Paul Ricard and a French winner, Alain Prost, then Nelson Piquet and Eddie Cheever. Very famous name, Nigel Mansell, here to give up after 6 lap because of broken toes, and due to the pain, he had really to stop. I mean, we all know, no, I don't know if you all remember Nigel Mansell, but he was really a fighter, nickname the Lion, Il Leone. Entonces, if Nigel Mansell had to stop because of pain, then it must really have been pain.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, San Marino.
Yeah.
And again, we have all French
Yeah.
podium. Look at that. Patrick Tambay, Alain Prost, and René Arnoux.
Exactly. This is just as we concluded. Important historic side note, this was the last Grand Prix which was witnessed by Enzo Ferrari in person. Enzo Ferrari traditionally not traveled outside the country, so the only Grand Prix which he really personally attended had been inside Italy. Yes, you may say it's not Italy, it's San Marino, but to be honest, San Marino is similar as the Vatican, a part of Italy, even if officially an independent country. And even the Grand Prix itself was not in the small country of San Marino, but directly in Italy, in Imola, so not that far away from Maranello.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Monaco. And again, we have two two French drivers at the podium, and Prost and René Arnoux, and Eddie Cheever in the third place.
Exactly, and the beautiful Williams in the photo with the typical Saudi Air tag livery tag. We will come back to this. Is the company who paid Porsche to develop an engine for Williams.
Yeah, I just want to say that to see the picture, you need to obviously watch us on YouTube
Yes.
or Spotify. And to those of you who sometimes we like every once in a while we get an odd comment of why are you guys kind of just showing slides and not videos. So this is meant to be a podcast, and we just have sort of some visuals in the video version. And so we essentially only share licensed material or material that is available on a CC BY license. So essentially, what we want to promote is ethical use of information. So please access materials where people share them legally, because this is important to copyright owners. And so we also hope that you will subscribe and do all the necessary YouTube things, press the bell and all that. If you're watching us on YouTube. But yeah, if you want to see the visuals, please refer to YouTube or Spotify versions.
Exactly. Belgium, we returned to Spa-Francorchamps. After for various years, we had the Belgian Grand Prix in Solda near the frontier to Germany. But as Solda became maybe outdated regarding safety, I mean, we still had the infamous fatal accident of Gilles Villeneuve. So everything went that people wanted to shift back to the typical Spa-Francorchamps, even if honestly, this is also a very dangerous track.
Well, it almost always rains, which makes it even more dangerous, but also at the same time interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
So why is it interesting? So if you didn't see kind of previous episodes that we've done with Patrick, we always explain that when the weather is nice, then obviously drivers in superior car are a lot more likely to win. But when it rains, all cars slow down. So better drivers have better chance against slightly weaker drivers. So if you are a great driver in an inferior car, you get better chance of winning. And this is why when we have rainy weather, it's always very interesting to watch what is going to happen on the track.
Exactly. And besides this, in addition, you may have up to a certain level a casino risk that you can gamble a little bit which tires you're using, because you're betting when rain will stop or when rain will start, when the track gets dry again. So there are a lot of perils. So
a lot of decision making goes
a lot of decision making. So up to a certain level, you also have casino risk here included, even if in general, of course, it supports the better drivers, or at least drivers which are more specialized of driving in the rain.
Yeah, we're back to US in Detroit, where it's Michele Barretto, Keke Rosberg, and John Watson.
Exactly. If I'm correct, this was the only Grand Prix in Motown Detroit. If you are with us on YouTube, Spotify, you see here Benetton. So Benetton entering the Formula One, still not as a team, but as a main sponsor of the Tyrrell team. But complete green, so it looks like a Benetton cars, but this is the Tyrrell.
Yes, that's right. In traditional British green.
Yeah, this.
Canada. I also want to remind people that we do have an early episode on colors. So you can actually see kind of traditional colors in that episode. Please refer to it. Yeah, Canada. Yeah, also usually very interesting, because also very often we have rain and poor visibility conditions. And again, we have two French drivers on the podium, René Arnaud and Patrick Tambay.
Yep. Fitting as Montreal, we are in the French part of Canada. Also Canadian red in the photo with the red Ferrari, so quite fitting. And besides this, we 83, I'm not completely sure, but I think the track was already renamed to Gilles Villeneuve circuit after the country's most well-known driver, which also have been locally quite near from Montreal.
Yeah,
And
UK
here we have
Silverstone.
the Lotus. Yeah, exactly. In the photos of the Lotus, so we see a lot of quite legendary liveries in this season, a lot of colors, which unfortunately I think became a little bit less in modern Formula One, but this practically aligned to what we see in the streets. 1980s, if you are walking around in the cities, you have cars in green, yellow, red, and not only white, silver, gray as nowadays in most places. But anyway,
Yeah.
returning to Formula One.
Yeah, but it has to do with the advertisement, right? So, like normally the cars are wearing the colors that the companies are using, and because generally the businesses use less and less colors every year. So basically this is what we know from computer vision research, that sort of the color palette narrows down. This is also it's also reflected in Formula One, that is significantly dependent on sponsorships. But this is very famous John Player livery, and we will see a lot of there will be very interesting stories related to John Player in this season, but not in this particular race. So you will see later.
Okay, so we are curious.
Yeah, and again, Alan Prost in the first place, Nelson Piquet in the second, and Patrick Tambay in the third, and then Patrick, you know Ferrari a lot better than me, so the introduction of 126 C3.
Exactly.
Can you say something about that? Maybe
Yeah,
a few words.
We do, but let's do it later when we speak about
when we talk about
the cars,
makes.
because we will show you both cars. And in fact, and this is not that only related to Ferrari in the 1980s and earlier. We saw often that the teams introduced the new car not before the race, but sometimes in the middle before the season, but in the middle of the season. So often the team started with their car from the last year and then bring the new version somewhere in the middle of the season, not as today, where this practically always had been done before the season, and then they use the same car. But we will see, we have both photos a little bit later. By the way, we mentioned it before in podcasts in the earlier seasons. UK, they always switch the track. 1 year is Silverstone, the next year is Brands Hatch, then it's again Silverstone, Brands Hatch, etc., etc.
But this season we will have two UK tracks. We will have Silverstone and Brands Hatch, and there is a very cool story about that we will tell when we get to Brands Hatch.
Exactly. So you see already this year the exception.
Yeah, so generally very good, very good run for Renault in Germany, and also in subsequent race, not in Austria, but in Austria also quite good, but also in Netherlands. But so here Renault was first, and so we also had quite a good run for Riccardo Patrese, who came third in that race.
Yeah, and even a better run for the second one, Andrea de Cesaris. If you see us on YouTube, you see still a bit of the car behind the Ferrari with the number 22, which looks like a McLaren. This is the Alfa Romeo, which normally wasn't that often in the front row. So a very great result for Andrea de Cesaris.
Yeah, and Niki Lauda got disqualified in this race. Yeah, that's also an important thing to mention. Yeah, again, as you see, Renault in Austria was second. So we're going to Austrian race.
Yeah,
and Alain Prost on the first spot and Nelson Piquet on the third.
that's right. This we can go directly Netherlands as always. Stanford again, René Arnoux with the Ferrari, then Patrick Tambay with the second Ferrari, and John Watson with the McLaren. And here Niki Lauda debuted the new Porsche built TAC turbo engine. He not very successful in the first race. He qualified only as the 19th and had to retire from the race. So the first premiere of this of this engine who would dominate Formula One for many years wasn't that successful.
Yeah, he really was struggling in 1983, Niki Lauda, but Niki Lauda never gives up, as we know. So, so naturally, eventually, it paid off. But this is kind of what we talked about a lot in this series when. On 1 year you may have really good car and everything is running great, and the next year you have a lot of reliability issues and lots of problems, even though you seem to be kind of really confident in the make, but in this case it just wasn't working, and eventually they switched the car. Sorry, the engine, and still it didn't work.
That's right.
Oh, this is a very interesting race, and I still remember, I remember this race very well. And you can find a really cool footage at the FIA official website, as well as some of the websites that have official footage of Italy Monza race. The one of the I don't want to no disrespect to Italian fans who are normally absolutely fantastic, but on this occasion, so essentially they sort of came at the beginning of the race, and they've written some kind of cheers for the Ferraris and some insults for other for other drivers, and so particularly Alain Prost got quite a lot of hammering from the fans. Psychologically speaking, of course, not physically. So psychologically, it was very difficult for Alain Prost to sort of to compete in this race. But eventually, Nelson Piquet emerged as a winner, and Ferrari, unfortunately, only came second. With René Arnoux in the second spot, and so which caused also quite a lot of upset to the fans.
And I assume not the first time Italian tifosi ran on the track. The moment the first three came through, ignoring that the race was still active. So Nigel Mansell slowed down to not endanger the tifosi, and as he did so, he still had been overtaken by Italian Bruno Giacomelli. So he lost one position because he slowed down due to the tifosi.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so it was a very emotional situation around this whole race in Italy.
Right.
Okay, so we come to the very interesting race of the season, right? And we need to explain that you normally, if you remember 1982 season, we had, first of all, we had 17 races in the season, and we had 3 US races. But in 1983, it was decided at the beginning of the season that there will be only 14 races. So the race that was supposed to happen in New York just didn't happen, right? So wasn't going to happen. And then the advertisers who paid for 17 races were like, why should we do? Why should we pay for advertisement on the tracks if we actually paid for 17 races, but because of this whole FISA FOCA controversy, and if you don't know what it is, you do really need to watch the special that Patrick and I have on this. But basically, yeah. So why should we suffer? And FISA and FOCA they agreed that there will be a second race in England, and they called it the Europe race, and it was in Brands Hatch. Another cool thing that I remember about that race, if you look at it, it's fantastically everything on the track is fantastically black and gold because so the previous Brands Hatch race was sponsored by Marlboro, and the entire track was kind of red and white, right? So on this occasion, it was John Player, so the cigarettes that sponsored the tobacco company that sponsored Lotus. And they insisted that because the previous in the previous year in 1982 everything was red and white, they said we want everything black and gold because this year we are paying.
Yeah.
so it was kind of this funny situation going into the race because first of all it was kind of the race that was not supposed to happen regionally and was put in because advertisers insisted. And then it also was surrounded by advertisement of one company that put like its colors everywhere, and it was notoriously black and gold.
And the idea of having a European Grand Prix state in Formula One, so we had this many years, mostly this to have
Spain.
a second race.
In Spain, right? Mostly.
Yeah, but also, for example, many times in Germany to have the Nürburgring and Hockenheimring. So I think it follows the money, to be honest. If there's a big market because there's a successful driver in country A, then there's a high possibility that this country gets also a second Grand Prix. At least in this time, where it was a little bit more maybe about the live event. Today it's maybe going that the TV rights have more importance, so you don't have too much to have a second Grand Prix in the same country because it doesn't matter the local fans that much in comparison to the global TV rights.
Yeah, and as Patrick explained earlier, we lost the unofficial races where advertisers could drive the agenda, but now they got the European race, which is kind of in the main grid, but at the same time primarily driven by advertisers and commercial interest. Yeah.
Exactly, and later it would become a problem that some countries already have forbidden or reduced tobacco advertising, and some countries still have been open to tobacco advertising. So this also became a factor to decide where we put the Grand Prix. Okay, we are going to South Africa. Normally a Grand Prix quite in the beginning of the season, but 83 a little bit more at the end. Well, directly at the end, to be honest. Last race, but the known famous Kwelami racetrack. And a victory for Ricardo Patrese, Andrea de Cesaris, again, very good results for him, and then Nelson Piquet.
Yeah, and this, like I said, was the decisive race because, well, Nelson Piquet ultimately emerged as the winner of the season. And it happened because Alain Prost was, not on the podium, despite being very successful throughout the entire season. And we had a winner, Nelson Piquet.
Whom we also see in the photo with now with the Parmalat powered by the BMW or BMW or BMW completely German set turbo engine.
Absolutely.
By the way, always fascinating from my point. We have here the British Brabham team, but always practically with Italian sponsors. Parmalat for many years, and then replaced by Italian Olivetti. Always staying with the dark blue.
Yeah, absolutely.
And before this, I mean, they also had other Italian sponsors as Martini, even though if they always have been a typical British team.
Yeah, that's right.
With
And
this,
we have quite a lot of specials on sponsorships where
yeah,
you can actually see various companies and how they affected Formula One.
exactly. With this, let's have first a view on the Constructors' Championship. And we have the same situation as a year before, even if the driver not came from Ferrari. The team won again the Constructors' Championship. Last year, of course, it was related to the fact of the fatal accident of Villeneuve and this accident of Didi Pironi, that none of the two drivers could finish the championship. This year, luckily, no accidents for Ferrari drivers. Nevertheless, none of them could secure the title for himself, but at least jointly together, they ensured the championship for Ferrari with 89 points before Renault and Brabham BMW, followed by Williams, McLaren, Alfa Romeo, Tyrrell, Lotus this year with the Renault engine, Toolman with the hard turbo engine. And you wanted to say something?
No.
Okay.
All good.
Sorry. And then let me see. Arrows with the traditional Ford, Williams with the new Honda engine. Honda came back to Formula One in one of the later races. 1893, and Theodore with the Ford engine. Also, we have some very small teams which hadn't any opportunity to really fight for points. Quite sad, Ligier Ford with 0 points, maybe not quite strong team in the last years, but staying with the Ford Cosworth maybe wasn't the best decision for them. Spirit Honda, here important to mention that Spirit was the first team in this year who used the Honda engine. I think Williams only did it in the last race or second last race, but Spirit already debuted Honda earlier this season. So this was the team which brought back the Honda engine this year. We have the German RTS team, which also got the German BMW engine. Osella using Alfa Romeo. We still have here McLaren tag. As for the Constructors' Championship, is always important the combination car and engine. So even if McLaren switched to tag, they have been separately in the list with the McLaren Ford Cosworth engine. And then, of course, Rumford, and the same as just mentioned, Osella in the beginning of the year still using the Ford Cosworth engine.
Yes.
As Ganna already mentioned, we have here the photos of the two different Ferraris. The team started with the 126, which was practically an evolution from last year's car, which you see on the left, and then brought the 126, which also had been an evolution, but a different level, the C3. And as you see, it looks a little bit different on the sides, not something complete new, but a next level evolution of their car.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say that it's not a very typical strategy for Ferrari to sort of introduced the car mid-season. We saw it before from them, but it is a very risky strategy that strangely paid off in this particular case, and they still got the championship, which is really amazing.
Yeah, but sometimes something which I think you don't see anymore. I haven't noticed it in the last year. So something which still was quite common in the 80s, but nowadays the team start, and I think maybe they even have to do this based on regulations, development cups, etc. So something which we don't have in Formula One anymore.
Yeah, it's now it's heavily regulated, obviously, and you have regulation on the usage of engines and the make and all that. Yeah, Williams.
FW Frank Williams 09.
And as you can see, because Williams always sort of tried to kind of crowdfund as much money as they could from different sponsors, you have a lot of sponsorship sort of logos on this car. And it really reflects the nature of Williams as sort of the team that always tries to find this kind of innovative ways to produce a car, and also very open to different types of sponsorships.
Exactly. And this is the car, if you look on the details with what they finished the season. This is the one already including the Honda engine, which they only had at the end of the season. So it's not the one with the Ford Cosworth, which they used for most of the time that year.
Right.
And the complete opposite to the crowd-funded Williams. The Tyrrell practically looks like a Benetton car with nearly nothing else than Benetton. Of course, they have Goodyear, carbon fiber cord alus. I don't know if this company is still existing. So if you look at it, Benetton green, it looks like a Benetton as it's their main sponsor.
Yeah, but
quite
still
interesting design. Sorry?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that it's I find that kind of cute because they in contrast to Williams that we just saw, who kind of couldn't make up their mind about what color they want to use. And they had all sorts of colors, like red and blue and green and yellow, all sorts. So the Tyrrell actually stuck to the traditional green. And even the Benetton, we kind of all of us who are Formula One fans, I think we all remember Michael Schumacher in Benetton car, and it's blue. We remember it's blue, right? But in this case, it's really cool to see Benetton on a traditional green, sort of British green, which is very interesting.
Exactly, and we are here in 1983, so this green was the typical Benetton color. You may remember later in the 90s, the more colorful Benetton, and this was also aligned with a change in their marketing campaign that they introduced the United colors of Benetton, where they had a big focus on diversity, inclusion. There had been a lot of discussions about Benetton marketing, as they, for example, showed also photos of graveyards where you see the fallen soldiers. I think also related AIDS, which was a big topic in late 80s. So there have been a lot of discussions about the marketing, the United colors of Benetton, and I think 83, this is before they implemented this marketing and campaign, and where they still had this typical green without any other big colors. I think it would be interesting to do also an episode about Benetton one day.
Yes, so we do have Benetton in Italian
In
sponsorships
correct.
video, so we do have a little bit about it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
But
maybe we
maybe we
could
do a special Flavio Briatore Benetton. That would
yeah,
be,
and
I
maybe
think,
we're
quite
gonna
fun.
get Benetton to pay for it for a change.
Exactly. Let's ask them.
Okay, so next one, Brabham.
Yeah.
So we do actually have a special on Brabham. And yeah, so I just really like this car. It's very sleek,
Yeah.
cute, and yeah, a
Yes.
beautiful car, really.
It is, and here also helps the livery, which isn't a crowdfunding, but a clear dark blue white, thanks to Parmalat.
Mhm.
Also, they have the fitting sponsors fitting based on colors as Fila and Michelin, which practically use the same dark blue. So very
Yes.
stylish, also
Yes,
in
yes,
colors.
very cute. But also the
Same.
make itself, it's kind of in the style of Brabham. Like you can tell that
Yes.
it's been sort of inspired by this karting cars and
Yes.
the Tyrrells and all that. But it's already Brabham as we know it. So yeah, it's just very beautiful, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, Gordon Murray for a long year, been a long year chief designer at Brabham. So you have this particular Brabham style also thanks to him.
Mhm.
Maybe a little bit less based on the car design itself, but to colors, yes, McLaren in the typical iconic Marlboro livery with the orange red.
Mhm. Yeah.
Again, I think a quite conservative approach from McLaren, but successful.
Yeah, so I think the majority of teams, they have kind of this major sponsor, and the colors are determined by that major sponsor. And then the rest are sort of just kind of fitted like small logos. But as we saw with Williams, you can have a car where that's not the case. But over the years, as we saw, Williams developed into kind of quite a mature team, and they had very good decisions with colors on at least several years for sure.
Yeah, that's right. Similar is also valid for the next team, RTS. RTS practically is sponsored by itself because RTS is a company selling wheels, and then the owner started to have this racing team. Later, the same owner at a different company, Real, also selling wheels. They started the Real team after the adventure with RTS. But back to 83, we see here the RTS, very nice colors, which is unfortunately the only positive thing you may say about the car, because it wasn't very successful.
Yeah, but I mean,
Which was not. Yes.
Yeah, it's kind of like you can see why, because it's kind of a little bit outdated shape, right?
Yes.
And also very strange kind of back and to these wings. I don't understand what exactly they were trying to achieve there. But so if you're watching us on YouTube, you can see this car.
Yep.
So it just kind of reminds me of like a gigantic bee or something. Yeah.
Yeah. To excuse a little bit the chief designer, I'm not completely sure, but I would assume the car was designed having the Ford Cosworth in mind and not the smaller BMW engine, which
Yeah, and
they received. So this
and
may excuse a little bit the design.
yeah, I just want to say that it really looks like a bee because bees that collect nectar, they kind of store store the like the goods in this kind of pockets on the legs. So
Yeah.
so it kind of very much looks like the insect.
Yeah,
Um,
but yellow and black had been the company colors of RTS, so not much else to do.
No, the colors are nice. I'm just it's the shape that really makes it look weird.
Right.
I think I wouldn't have a problem with it if it looked like, say, Brabham, right? So you
Yeah.
could have the same colors, but it would be a lot more pleasant to look at.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Completely agreed. And with this, we're coming to the Lotus
Yeah, the legendary
94.
John player.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also here, I would say looks relatively conservative, especially if you consider Lotus always had been on leading regarding invitation, aerodynamics, and but same here also Lotus. I think the very first races started still with the Cosworth engine, and then switched to the Renault engine. So maybe the car was not originally designed having the Renault engine in mind, even if they started with it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when you're trying to fit a different engine than was planned, things go wrong. But also, we have a special on Colin Chapman, who was the main kind of mastermind behind Lotus designs. So please have a look at it. And there we discuss the whole kind of crisis in 1980s. And what was going on with the team. So there were quite a lot of contributing factors to why Lotus did not perform well.
Yeah, that's
but
right.
to find out what these things are, you need to go to that special episode. Yeah.
That's right, folks. And here we have it, the Renault RE40.
Yeah, so see, again, we have yellow here and, white and black, but looks a lot better than, than the ATS car.
Yes, and much more successful.
Yes, exactly. Well, for that reason, because it's just better designed, but more aerodynamic and just generally a lot more stable car.
Yeah, and from the big ones, let's have a view on the smaller teams, RAM, and here again the design looks a little bit like a mixture, a little bit of the Brabham, the slick design, but besides this, much more conservative approach. From Brabham, also the Alfa Romeo, quite conservative, even if not a bad year. We had some quite good results from Andrea de Cesaris. Same
And
colors.
Yeah, and we already discussed that it was sometimes difficult to tell the difference between Alfa Romeo and McLaren for the reason that Marlboro was the main sponsor for both teams.
Yeah, Marlboro was a sponsor like for half of the teams. Well, just two teams, they have been the main sponsor, and for the others, they have been like a secondary or third level sponsor.
Yeah, and again, we have two-part special on tobacco sponsorships in Formula One and what impact this tobacco sponsorship had on the sport. So please check them out. And we're going to Arrows.
Yep, Arrows with the A6. Unfortunately, Arrows not a team which have been relevant anymore. Also, they went away from the very radical designs which they had at the end of the 70s, for example. So also for Arrows, small team, and as often seen, small teams have a quite conservative approach, as they cannot compete with speed. So at least you want to go play it safe regarding reliability, for example.
Yep.
And with this, the Italian Ostella team with if Kilimoto is maybe Brazilian sponsor. Honestly, I'm not completely sure. I mean, it would remind me a little bit to the Fittipaldi cars, very conservative. approach.
Yeah.
But nice, lovely, small Italian team. Unfortunately, not overly successful. We stay blue for the next teams. The Theodora N183. Also nice Formula One car, as you would design it. Quite a bit conservative, but not a big budget for this team. With this last one, this is the Spirit 201 powered by the Honda engine. As we just mentioned, Marlboro had been a secondary third level sponsor for various teams, including Spirit. You see here, completely not fitting to any color, especially not really fitting to the Honda red, the Marlboro orange red, but they just put on the sticker without any ideas that it has to fit to a general livery.
That's right. Without much consideration of the aesthetics of the coloring.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, at least they can say they brought back the Honda engine before Williams, so at least something for the team.
All right.
From the machines to the humans, the people, the drivers.
Let's look at the drivers.
Yep.
Yeah. So we have Nelson Piquet, Alain Prost, and René Arnoux. And, you know, what a disappointment for Alain Prost. Like I said, he was very, very successful. And to be honest, René Arnoux also, you know, could have, you know, edged it. But Nelson Piquet emerged as the winner.
Exactly. I mean, Alain Prost will suffer something similar again in the 80s, but I think we can be optimistic. He will win some championship, so we don't have to worry about him.
Maybe we don't know that yet.
We don't know for sure, but we are optimistic.
We will have to see. Will he win?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So maybe a little bit more disappointing for René Arnoux and for Patrick Tambay, because the car had the potential. Was there. They won the championship, but for whatever reasons, they not achieved also nailing the drivers' championship.
I don't know. I mean, it just depends on how you look at it. I think it also just tells you that they worked better as a team, right? Compared to others. And maybe that was the factor of success for Ferrari as a constructor. And not so much, so the car definitely was there, but at the same time we had this introduction of a new make in the middle of the season, which is stressful. But as a team, they held up together, which is great.
That's completely correct. But as you know, I mean, Formula One drivers are also quite egocentric mostly. So I'm sure they wanted to win the drivers' championship, besides having, of course, this great team result.
Yeah, but also, we know Enzo Ferrari's rules, and yes. I'm sure that it was like his way or highway. So I don't think anyone argued too much.
No, I mean, this is the same as in each company. You, as an individual employee, may have complete different goals than your boss, for example.
Well, then we have Keke Rosberg and John Watson.
Yeah,
a lot older drivers. We need to note, kind of compared to, say, Alain Prost, who was 28.
Yeah, I mean, for Keke Rosberg and Williams, a little bit disappointing. I mean, I would strongly align this that they waited a little bit too long with implementing the turbo engine. and the Ford course was not competitive anymore. I not want to say that it was their fault, because they also had to wait until Honda was ready to really have this engine working. But sometimes it didn't went together as you plan it, and this time Williams, as they not had the engine ready in the beginning, hadn't really been able to compete related to championship.
And notice we nicely highlighted colorful Patrick Tambay because he's with Ferrari, and we kind of made Williams and McLaren a little bit black and white. And I'm joking. Of course, it's not deliberate. Again, it kind of is based on the photos that we could show you based on the licensing. But, you know, it is what it is.
That's right. With this, we're coming to position 7, 8, 9. Eddie Cheever with the second with Renault, relatively in the shadow of Alain Prost. Of course, difficult for a US American being in a French team. As we know, French people not speak that perfectly all the time English. And we had, of course, the local driver as number 1, so not difficult for anybody who's not French there.
Yeah, it's probably culturally difficult. Let's not insult. We don't mean any, like, we do not want to insult any sort of francophones who are watching us. Obviously,
it was meant as
some, you know, we know some people in France speak perfect English. Just you know, just has to do with culture, yeah, and also, you know, he was a younger driver than Alain Prost, so less experienced, but nevertheless, you know, for very good result for him. So
correct. Also, Andrea De Cesaris, a very young Italian driver, very good result for Alfa Romeo this year. And
so
then
is
finally,
Riccardo Patrese also Italian, despite the name, right?
Yeah, exactly. Italian, and besides this, I think one of the drivers with the longest career inside Formula One. I don't know if it's the longest, but it must be one of the drivers really with the longest career. Maybe besides Kimi Räikkönen, Alonso. I remember still him from the late 90s or middle 90s.
Barrichello probably another example. Yeah. Anyway, we'll get there. We will actually we will calculate who had the longest career.
Yeah. I don't know, but I would assume if you just ask Google this question, you will get the statistic. So not that much investigation may be necessary.
Yeah, that's right. But we will do that too.
Yep.
Yeah. So in terms of notable characters, yeah, I mean, I would go with Enzo Ferrari probably to kind of for the introduction of the new make mid-season. Probably.
Yeah, and I mean, Enzo Ferrari anyway would be a good choice, as it was the last time as the old man, as he's also called sometimes, saw a victory in person. And Enzo Ferrari, a leading figure since the very first, the second Formula One race. As remember, the first Formula One race, Ferrari not participated. They started in the second race of the 1950 season. So a man who dominated Formula One since the beginning of 1950 and still is in a relevant function in the 1980s, even if he's not physically present at the races himself.
and still taking risk, which is more important, I
Yes.
guess, than anything else.
Taking risk and underlines the importance of the team in opposite to the driver. So we don't have, for example, as we saw often at Brabham, that they're really focusing on one driver alone and having maybe a second driver who's like a paid driver. Not in 83 with Riccardo Patrese, they had a good second driver, but we saw other years where we practically only focus on one of the cars.
Yeah, for the notable win, I would go with Nelson Piquet in Monza because it was such a difficult race for many people.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in terms of accidents, I don't know, there were quite a few, kind of unfortunate events. But yeah, probably we didn't have a major event that season, which also kind of tells you that this whole ban on ground force cars kind of worked, right? Considering that it was fewer incidents that we had. And notable strategies. Well, again, Ferrari, I'd say. As a team,
would agree. I agree. Based strategies based on the team, I would completely agree with you here.
Well, in terms of legacy for the season, like I said before, I'm just going to repeat myself, and I think this was really a year of French drivers, where we had a lot of talent from France on the track, and it was really great to watch because it makes a nice change from seeing quite a few people from Italy and from UK and some other places. So for me, really, it was sort of a big change and big victory for French driving talent.
Yeah, I agreed. Also, as we discussed, it was a systematic approach which had been relatively sustainable. I mean, it didn't last until today. I mean, I'm just thinking, do we have any French driver in 2022? I'm not aware of, so it's not. It lasts a long time. It lasted a long time, 1980s, 1990s, but not until today. But really, it was a quite relatively sustainable approach, which worked well for French drivers for a long time. And of course, it's not only the system. You also have to have the luck that you have these big talents. Same as you see, for example, in football, some nations dominate the championships every 4 years, but like 3 times, then another nation comes up because on the systematic support of young talents, but also you need luck, you need to have these people born at the same time.
Yeah, we do have Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon.
Yeah, sorry,
yeah.
right.
So yeah, like I thought that Esteban Ocon might be, but Pierre Gasly also. Yeah, so we have 2 people, two French drivers. Yeah.
Thanks.
So I mean, apologies to Formula One fans who are very knowledgeable about nationalities. So yeah, I kind of sort of thought that they were Swiss, but anyway. French, yeah.
Yeah, good. So we have this also cleared.
Yeah, very good.
Okay, that's all for today. As always, we are on YouTube and Spotify with the video version. If, let's say, if you are traveling, you are in the train, in the car, and just want to listen to us, we have various opportunities where you can also download the audio version of the podcast, which of course you can program in your podcast catcher.
Yes, and just again a reminder that we don't don't argue that we know everything, like you just saw now with French drivers.
Right.
We're really knowledgeable about Italians, Brits, and Germans, but probably not so much with French drivers, and especially because many Formula One drivers live in Switzerland, effectively. So that kind of complicates things. But anyway, we just want to say that, if you spot any, mistakes or you want to add something, we're always looking for feedback and looking for additional facts and things that you can add to what we're saying. And of course, we're always happy to improve any errors or clarify something. And probably tell you more about things that you are interested in. So please leave your feedback underneath the video and let us know what you think.
Yep.
Thanks a
Sounds
lot.
good.
And we'll see you next time.
See you next time. Bye-bye.